questions. But now that we are recording, I'll go ahead and start off. So I'm Christina Milliman, and I'm the Project Director for Educational Opportunity Centers. We primarily work with participants who are looking to go to college, so we help them with their FAFSA, college admissions applications, scholarship applications, and the like. And we'll be talking tonight a little bit about financial aid and what that looks like in going to college and such. So I'm going to just pass it over to Ian so he can introduce himself.
Yeah. So I'm Ian Zerby. I'm an admissions representative for the University of Wyoming. Hannah Elk Mountain and Carbon County and some different places are in my territory, which is really cool. And I am here not just representing the University of Wyoming. So this is definitely just a college-focused event. So if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to hear that Haley's looking at going to school at UW, so we can definitely talk some admission stuff and things like that. But I'm here as just a representative from kind of the admission side, and we can talk about starting at community college. We can talk about if there's anything that I know about universities or four-year schools or community colleges or tech schools or anything like that across the country that I can provide some insight in. I'll try and do that. But yeah, I was really, really happy when Christina invited me to come along. So bonus points if you can guess the name of this lake and mountain range here.
I can't.
This is the Cirque of the Towers out up in the Wind River Mountains. This is the Lonesome Lake at the base there.
So is that Wind River Peak, Ian?
Wind River Peak is like way over
there.
That way.
A
ways, yeah.
Okay, cool. I did a stint through my master's program. We did a week in the winds and camped and like backpacked in, and it was pretty neat. So yeah. Cool. Awesome. All right.
That's where we took my honeymoon, so.
Ooh, fun. Awesome. That's perfect. So just a little bit more about Educational Opportunity Centers, just to give you guys a little more information. We are a federally funded grant program, a TRIO program, hence the background that I've got going on behind me. We provide free assistance, like I said, understanding financial aid, the FAFSA, college admissions, and the like. So that's just a little bit about what we do. So we'll go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty and cost of education. We're going to start with a fun little comic here. I'm just going to throw out there, can everybody see the comic if you're not on a cellular device or calling in? I hope. Cool. I love the thumbs up. So I find this funny because, when your kid goes off to college, they pretty much take everything, including the microwave. So if you don't want your microwave to leave your home, you might want to bolt it in somehow nice and tight. But that is another thing too, that as parents, we help our children, go to college and succeed. So if they have to take the microwave, I guess out the door it goes. So, all right. Getting just into a little cost estimating. I'm going to compare a few different colleges just so that everyone can understand a little bit about tuition and fees. So if you're planning to go to the University of Wyoming, you can plan on the Wyoming resident yearly cost. So it's about $16,978. The way this breaks down is this next page here. So tuition, you can see for the whole year is about $4,350. And because we have Ian here, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him, and he can talk a little bit more about your tuition and fees and all costs.
Yeah. So the big thing that I find with students is I always try to assume that we're just on page one and everyone's on the same level. And so usually, the biggest thing I want students to know is that there's a big difference. What it really shows is there's a big difference between in-state and out-of-state cost of attendance. And a lot of schools, the other thing to pay attention to is a lot of times the cost of your education oftentimes tuition and cost of attendance get confused. And so I hear a lot of people talk about, they've got a great tuition. It's only $4,000 a year to go to school at this place. But you have to know that there's more costs than that to going to school. And so it definitely depends. And going in-state is, especially for a Wyoming resident, going in-state is going to be much more inexpensive than anywhere else out of state at base level, without scholarships and some of the other things that we're going to talk about. So you can kind of see the breakdown there of tuition, fees, room and board. And so your direct cost is that $16,978. Know that also a lot of times, lots of different schools, including the University of Wyoming, we break it down per credit hour. So you only need, technically a student needs 12 credit hours a semester to be full-time. And that's another thing to keep in mind with scholarships and financial aid and things like that. They often require full-time enrollment. And so that's something to look at. Average is about 15 credit hours. So that's where we get that number, but that's going to fluctuate based on how many credits you're taking. It also fluctuates a little bit based on major. So things like oftentimes those program fees are going to be related to what you need for your major. If you're an engineering student and you need a lot of different specialty programs for your degree, it may be on the higher end. If you're an art student where you need a lot of different supplies, those program fees might be a little bit on the higher end. If you're a journalism student and you're doing everything from your computer off of Word and things like that, those costs may not be quite as high there. And then we try to give you a budget. I think I like the way the university does. We try to be as transparent as possible. And we try to give you that other extra budget on the bottom there to just say, you know, if you're living in Hanna or something, or Elk Mountain, it's going to be a lot different than if you're living in Jackson, or if you're living in Montana somewhere, or Omaha or something like that. So those personal expenses may vary too. And that's just something that we try to give you a little bit of a budget so you're not getting blindsided.
Awesome, thanks, Ian. All right, so the next school that I have is our most expensive community college here in the state of Wyoming. As you can see, their direct and indirect cost estimate is going to be $15,042. So about $6,000 difference than the University of Wyoming. Other community colleges, if you're looking at going to one of those, tend to be a little cheaper than LCCC. So just a fun fact about LCCC for you. Another fun fact here is Colorado State University. This is, these are non-resident tuition and direct and indirect cost estimates. So this is essentially what it might cost you to go to Colorado State University if you are looking at that college to go to from Wyoming. So that's almost $49,000 a year. And when you're talking, you know, financial aid and such, financial aid only covers so much. So you're really going to have to apply for scholarships or other means, finding those other means to help pay for an institution like Colorado State University if you're planning to go somewhere like that. And just a super fun one, because who doesn't want to, you know, aspire to go to Harvard or any other Ivy League? If you decide to go somewhere like that, you're looking at anywhere from $75,000 plus, and that's just a year. So when you multiply that by 4 years, that's a pretty penny at the end of the day. But it's an Ivy League school, so, you know, how cool would that be too? Typically though, an institution like Harvard would have a pretty good award offer if you've got, you know, good grades and a lot to bring to the table as well. So, all right, so just a fun little clip here for everyone to enjoy. It says on the side, ouch, don't get hit in the face with student debt. So this just being that, you know, when you get to college and planning for college in general, looking at grants and scholarships will really be beneficial for you so that you can avoid the student debt and student loans that you could come out with. That's just another point, you know, of if you plan to go out of state, make sure that you're really planning for, you know, scholarships and other things to help get you through college. Here in the state of Wyoming, you guys are pretty lucky with that thing called the Hathaway Scholarship. And we'll touch on that in just a little bit too, but let's try to avoid as much student debt as we can. Okay, so just a quick little table here about the value of education. So as you can see at the bottom left-hand side here, the unemployment rate for someone that doesn't have a high school diploma and roughly what you're making per week, okay? And then it goes on up to a doctoral degree and again, earnings per week. So I would just like to show this table because I feel that it brings a little light to, you know, if you are deciding or on the fence about going to college or not, maybe this will help help you in your decision making. You know, there's more people that are unemployed with just a high school diploma, so, and they don't make as much. So getting a bachelor's degree, you're less likely to be unemployed and you have a higher weekly earning typically. So, okay. So then we'll get into types of financial aid. So we've got grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. We'll start off with grants. Grants are free money. This is money that you do not have to pay back to the federal government. Typically they come from federal grants, such as the Pell Grant, which is something that you'll start hearing a lot about if you haven't already. Grants also, such as the Pell Grant, if you receive the Pell Grant, there are some stipulations, one being that you do not drop out within the semester that you're using Pell funds. So for instance, if you aren't doing very well in your classes for your first year, you definitely need to continue and push through to hopefully increase your grade by the end of the semester, but don't drop out. The minute you drop out is the minute the federal government is going to come back and say, hey, we gave you this money and now we want it back. So just be aware of that. If you do receive a Pell Grant, plan to stick it out for the whole semester. And then there's just a list of a couple other grants there too that could be available. Scholarships. Those are also things that can be deemed as free money, things that you don't have to pay back. So typically a scholarship is going to require though that you have maybe letters of recommendation. So when you think about letters of recommendation, my suggestion is to find people who know you pretty well. It could be a coach, could be your counselor, could be a teacher that you may have had for all 4 years that you've developed a really good relationship with. I also recommend that you do not have someone like a parent or a sibling write a letter of recommendation for you. Typically these need to come from an outside of your family entity. It could even be someone, if you're, you know, religious and you are close with your church or something, maybe there's someone in the church that could write a letter of recommendation for you. Honestly, just anybody that you work closely with or have for the last at least 4 years. Scholarships may also require a personal essay. My recommendation here is to write just a general personal essay that you could attach to multiple different scholarships. Unless the scholarship requires something specific in your personal essay, typically a general one will suffice for any of those scholarships. And some may require a formal interview. So just be on the lookout for those. Okay. And of course, the exception is the Hathaway, because that's something that's pretty much given if you have a GPA and ACT score that match. So talking about the Hathaway, which I'm sure majority of you have heard a ton about. So you start off on the far right-hand side of this picture here, the provisional Hathaway scholarship. That one does require you to start off at a 2-year or community college here in the state of Wyoming. And then after you complete those first 2 years, then you can move on to the University of Wyoming if you want to keep your Hathaway scholarship. The other 3 then do not require you to start off at a community college, but if you so desire, they definitely will apply at a community college. So that's just a little breakdown of that. Keep in mind that you do have to have a certain GPA and ACT score to qualify and make sure that you're taking all of those classes. But typically, high schools now follow what Hathaway is requiring, so you should be all set as far as Hathaway requirements go. Okay. Then other national scholarships that could be a possibility. So let's say you looked at your high school And maybe there's some scholarships through your high school, maybe there's some scholarships in Hannah or Elk Mountain, more community-based scholarships you've applied to. You've applied to any scholarship through the institution that you're looking at, and you're still looking for some funds to go to college. There are national scholarship resources. These are just a few that you can look at. These also typically aren't, $1,000 scholarships, although there could be. These are typically lower amounts, but if you were to submit, say, 100, because these application, the application to the scholarship isn't necessarily as lengthy as, say, $1,000 scholarship application may be. So if it's a $100 scholarship, and let's say there's 100 of them that you apply to, and you only receive 10, that's $1,000 towards your college. So that's a pretty big deal. Yeah, it's only 10%, but hey, it's better than nothing. So at the end of the day, if these are something that you're interested in, I'd recommend it. Just make sure that you hit all of those other notches before you go to the national scholarships. So like I said, the first one is going to be the general scholarship through your college. Then look for local and regional scholarships. You could also contact your financial institution, insurance agencies, even your parents' employers, religious institutions, etc., for scholarships. For instance, when I was planning to go to college, the church that I attended had a scholarship. So of course I applied for that scholarship all 4 years that I was in college, and received it all 4 years. So definitely look at those other institutions that you may be heavily involved in. Even if you volunteer somewhere, they may have scholarships that you can apply to. And then lastly, definitely look at those national scholarship resources. Ian, do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I always like to remind students too is this is a great way to go through it, and it's always hard to know how much you're going to need. It's always hard to know, how much scholarship do I need to cover this stuff? What is it? I mean, how much should I apply for? All of that kind of thing. And to put it in perspective a little bit, so if you have the top award of Hathaway, if you've got that $1,600 per semester, that's $3,360 a year. And if you looked at some of the tuition costs of like LCCC and UW, it's roughly, for tuition alone, it's roughly $4,000. So you figure if you've got Honors Hathaway, you've almost knocked out your tuition. You can start working on some of those other costs and things like that. So I always recommend just apply. I mean, get through as many scholarships as you can, because it is free money. And I always talk to students, it's like, well, it's only a one-time scholarship for $500 or a one-time scholarship for $1,000. And the other thing that I usually like to say too is I always put it in terms of work, right? So a lot of students will mow a yard, it takes an hour, right? And you get paid $20 or something, right? If you fill out 10 scholarships in 2 hours and you get 2 of those scholarships, right? You just made $500 an hour, right? Does that work? Yeah. Depending on what it is, right? Depending on how much the scholarship is. Say you get one scholarship for $1,000. You spent 2 hours filling out 10 scholarships. It really does pay off. Your time is absolutely worth it if that's what you're getting out of it. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Do you want to also mention or talk about the UW commitment here? I think it might be beneficial as part of the general scholarship application, at least for the University of Wyoming.
Yeah, so that's the other thing too. A lot of colleges will have just a general scholarship application. So one application that applies to a whole variety of scholarships all throughout the institution. I know a lot of our Wyoming community colleges have that as well. Certainly the university does. The university, we have kind of gone to, it's similar to a central awarding style platform, but what it is rather than applying for all kinds of different scholarships throughout the university, we offer the Cowboy Commitment, and that is our commitment to you. Wherever you land on that grid system as a Wyoming resident, you can get up to $6,500 a year, depending on your GPA, and ACT scores. And so, based on your GPA and test scores, if you can keep that up, and I know that it's been hard getting the ACT this year. This year's been a much different year. But you have up until at least May 1st as of right now. I know our Board of Trustees is meeting to talk about some of those deadlines and things like that today. They met today and yesterday. And so, you know, as of right now, I mean, you have clear until May 1st of your senior year to retake an ACT, to work on your GPA, all of those kind of things, to hopefully help get you some better scholarship opportunities. And then all your part of our Cowboy commitment is to fill out the general scholarship application.
Perfect. Thank you, Ian. Okay, let's see. So next is just some keys to scholarship and college applications. You definitely want a good essay, you know, some good extracurricular activities, a good ACT score, some demonstrated interest. You want a good cumulative GPA, some good courses, and then of course those teacher counselor recommendations that we talked about earlier. Then we get into work study. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with work study, it is through the federal government. So once you fill out your FAFSA and everything gets sent to the institution that you're looking at going to, it is income based or need based. So that being said, if you are need based, the institution will then offer you a federal work study position. These are part-time jobs, typically on campus, and they offer you a paycheck, you know, depending on how the institution pays. It could be every 2 weeks, it could be every month, depending on how all that is worked out with whichever institution you plan to attend. With work study and an on-campus job, they typically also work with your course schedule. So that being said, if you've got, you know, class and stuff at certain times, then your hours would be varied based upon when you're in class and when you have labs and such that is going on. I also want to note that a lot of jobs that are with work study could be as simple as sitting in a computer lab and monitoring the computer lab. So while you're working those 10 hours a week, let's say, in a computer lab, you could also be using those 10 hours to work on some homework or paper writing while you're monitoring the lab. So they could be pretty easy jobs depending on the work study positions that are open. So.
The other thing I'll say about work study too is a lot of times the terms work study and student employment get mixed up. And so while you have to qualify for work study, if for some reason you don't qualify for work study, that doesn't mean you can't work on campus. We have over 1,500 student employees at the University of Wyoming. And so there's jobs in campus recreation, there's jobs in residence life and dining, groundskeeping, all of that kind of stuff. And usually some of those are work study and some are student employment. So work study just truly kind of keeps those jobs for select a group of students so that we can make sure that if you need that opportunity, that it's available to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So this next slide here talks about federal student loans, and I've got another little comic to the right. And the parents were saying, we're so proud he was voted most likely to pay off his student debt. A lot of us need loans and such to get through college. So this slide talks about those loans. Through the federal government, there are two types of loans. They're called subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans are where the federal government pays the interest until you are done with college. Unsubsidized loans start accruing interest the minute you pull the money from the federal government. Big difference at the end of the day as far as interest goes and how much debt you leave college with. The last little note here are the federal direct plus loans. These are typically in the form of a Parent Plus loan or some form of other loan options to help students get through college. My recommendation is to avoid these as much as possible. Parent Plus loans, typically if a parent pulls a Parent Plus loan, you are required to start paying on that loan pretty much immediately. So just keep that in mind. Apply for those scholarships all the time. All right, now we're getting into the good stuff. So FAFSA. This stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And there's a cute little comic with a gal. She says, I have no idea how to fill this out. A lot of people don't. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you with that. So the FAFSA, first thing to remember is that first F stands for free. There are scam sites out there that will charge you to complete a FAFSA. I do not charge you to help you with your FAFSA, just so you know too. My services are free as well. So we'll get you through the FAFSA. They do open October 1st for the next year. So we want to get your FAFSA done as soon as possible. This will help with any award letters and such that are going to be coming from the institution. Okay, stop. Sorry, dog. Anyways, you also have to complete a FAFSA every year. So if you complete your FAFSA this October 2nd, we'll say, that's good for next year, but once October 2nd rolls around next year, you'll have to complete it for the next year of college. We also go in your FAFSA, it's based on your prior tax return. Sorry, trying to get all the words here. So if you've completed your tax return for 2019, you're set. We can get your FAFSA done, no problem, after October 1st when it opens. A little note here too is that most students will be considered dependent students and will need the parent tax return from 2019 as well. The only exceptions are ward of a state or homeless. Another term for homeless is unaccompanied youth. I don't necessarily like the term homeless, but that's how they have it worded, so in the FAFSA. So with FAFSA, also apply early to ensure that all of the money you qualify for, that you can receive it. So that being said, if you apply by, let's say, August, right before school starts, and you are estimated to get a Pell Grant, you might not receive the Pell Grant because the Pell money through financial aid is already gone. So we definitely want to get you in, get the FAFSA done as soon as possible, and get it done correctly the first time so we don't have to make FAFSA corrections. There is also, depending on the institution, you do have priority deadlines, and many scholarships require you to complete the FAFSA before you even can complete the scholarship application. For instance, the Daniels Fund, that's one where you have to complete the FAFSA before you can complete the Daniels Fund application. And I think typically the Daniels Fund application is due in November. So we definitely want to get your FAFSA done sooner rather than later.
Sorry to interrupt. I didn't get a chance to see everything. Sorry, Tara.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, that Daniels Fund is a financial-based scholarship. Is that correct?
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
So they have to fill out the FAFSA, and then that Daniels Fund will tell you if you can continue on with applying for the scholarship, or if too much money is made, then you don't qualify for it. So yeah, it is more of a needs-based scholarship. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I didn't hear the early part. If you did talk about when FAFSA did open up, if it's still the 1st of October.
Yep, that's correct. So October 1st is when it opens, and we want to get it done sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The other quick thing I'll note on FAFSA is that I know a lot of students talk about, well, why do I have to do this every single year? And what's nice about that is, if you're nice or maybe not nice, is if your family situation has changed, if hopefully this doesn't happen, but say a parent loses a job or something like that, then you can kind of account for that by filling this out every year. And with this year being such a crazy one as well, there is, and Christina can talk just a hair about this too, but if something has happened between 2019, because they do use prior years, if something has happened between 2019 and now, I believe there is sort of an exemption you can fill out.
Yeah, so Ian's correct about that. So if you, let's say 2019, you made a substantial amount compared to 2020, since we're closing in on the end of 2020, a lot has changed for a lot of families. Institutions realize this, so they, from my understanding, are making the appeal process easier for those that wish to use 2020 financial information instead of 2019. And I'm more than happy to help anybody that needs to go through that process, So not a problem. Okay, so just some terminology for FAFSA. We have the SAR, or the Student Aid Report. This is just basic information and everything regarding what you filled out in the FAFSA and reviewing it for accuracy. Then you have the EFC, Expected or Estimated Family Contribution. This number also determines eligibility for financial aid. So the higher EFC you have, the less eligible you are for, say, Pell Grant, or a higher financial loan amount. This shouldn't worry you yet, and it doesn't, the EFC number that comes in doesn't mean that that's the number that you are required to pay for college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The last little terminology here is the ISER, so the Institutional Student Information Record, and this is just information provided to a college, providing an account of student financial aid history and eligibility. So just a few words. And then we briefly mentioned this, but talking a little bit about an award letter and what that might look like. So let's say you apply to the University of Wyoming, you're planning to come. Granted, the University of Wyoming is not going to be $41,000 for you as an in-state resident. We're just going to play along that it is. So you're looking at total direct costs, so not the indirect costs, just direct costs, so tuition and fees, room and board, etc. $41,200. The financial aid package consists of a Pell Grant for you. You've also got a Perkins loan, an SEOG grant, a sub-Stafford loan. You've got another college grant. You've got unsubsidized loans, and then you've got the Parent Plus loan. So your total financial aid is going to be $31,250, leaving a difference of $9,950. So practically $10,000 that you have to come up with. In other words, this is the gap between how much is covered by financial aid and how much you still owe after financial aid. How do you fill the gap? So let's go ahead and talk about ways that we can fill the gap. So down at the bottom, there are savings or 529 plans. You could look at home equity lines of credit. You could look at working with the institution on a payment plan. You could find maybe other accounts and private loans to look at as far as filling the gap in a nice way. There are ways to fill the gap that you probably should avoid, and we'll get there in a second. So, like we said, options for filling the gap. A big one too is definitely working. So a lot of the students that attend college will work. So just getting a part-time job, say at the university or even at a place in the town that you're going to college. So that could be a gas station, it could be a grocery store, it could be, you know, if you had a job in your hometown that was doing lawn care services, maybe you go get a job with a lawn care company in the town that you're moving to, if you have experience in that. So there's definitely opportunity for jobs, and that could help fill the gap and pay off that $10,000. Other options, like we talked about, so the savings account or 529 plans, interest-free tuition payment plans. You can look at home equity loans, retirement and life insurance accounts, and then private loans. And then, of course, bad options for filling the gap. Credit cards are a huge no-no. They have really high interest, and I don't want to see people go through more debt just to pay off other debt that you could find other ways to pay it off. Also, I do not recommend pulling from a 401k to pay off or fill the gap. So just some bad options that we want to avoid. And then continuing to receive your financial aid. So a lot of institutions in the federal government specifically, typically all institutions have what they call a SAP policy. SAP is Satisfactory Academic Progress. This is how the federal government ensures that you're, you know, completing the courses that you're saying you're going to complete, you're on track to get the degree that you're going for, you're keeping a decent GPA of a 2.4 or above, and that you're completing, 8 out of 12 credits, and then you're not over the maximum allowed credits for your degree, dependent on your year of school as well. So all of these add up, and that's how financial aid determines whether you can receive or continue to receive financial aid or not. There are appeal processes for continuing to receive financial aid. But if you can avoid it, you should definitely try to avoid it. Get some tutors if you're struggling in class. There's plenty of resources out there for you and to help you succeed in college.
The main idea as an institution for sure is just, keep your grades up, go to class, take notes, do all that kind of stuff you're probably already doing. Keep your grades up, and then, pass the courses that you attempt. And then the other one is just as part of that, overall number of credit hours and things like that. It helps if you don't, change your major a bunch of times, things like that, so that you can really progress through your degree quickly, and be able to complete that. Oftentimes, financial aid will cap at about 180 credit hours. And so if it takes most bachelor's degrees take somewhere around 120 something to 130 credit hours to complete. So the idea is just that you're jumping into your degree, you're completing all your classes, you're keeping your GPA up, and you're getting that degree as soon as you can.
So then just something to keep in mind that, when you're filling out those scholarships, there could be other requirements, such as a thank you letter. So let's say the scholarship says, yeah, we require you to write a thank you letter. So once you receive the scholarship, be sure to get that thank you letter out the door as quickly as possible. They could also require you to attend meetings, maybe to accept the scholarship, or to attend meetings for so long to ensure that you continue to get the scholarship. There could also be volunteer requirements. So just be aware of other requirements when you're filling out scholarship applications and the like. Anybody confused? Maybe? Yeah, Ian's always confused. Me too. I get pretty confused. So that was a lot of information pretty quickly. And so Ian and I are going to be here for a little while, and we're more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. And then on this last slide, I just put our information up again. So if you feel the need to contact one of us at a separate time or would like to talk to us individually, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions at a later date too. But if there are any questions now, please, you can unmute yourself and ask away.
Hi, for the Hathaway honors, is it both 25 ACT and a high GPA, or is it one or the other?
From my understanding, it's both. So you have to have that GPA and ACT.
That's correct. It's both the GPA and the ACT score for all of those levels at Hathaway. The other thing that you want to make sure of is that you have the correct courses. There is also a curriculum requirement with Hathaway. Travis, were you going to talk about that just a little bit?
No, I was going to ask another question. So yeah, you can keep going with that.
Yeah. So the curriculum requirements, what's nice is oftentimes they're probably going to mirror what you need to graduate from high school. For the University of Wyoming, it's actually our curriculum requirements to be admitted are the same as the Hathaway. And so that's going to be 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 3 years of social science, and then 4 years of something else, with 2 of those years being sequenced. So I know that's a lot to remember, but those 4 years of other stuff, it used to be you had to take either some sort of foreign language, Spanish 1, Spanish 2 would cover 2 of those, cover that sequenced requirement. Now it's opened up, it's a little bit broader now to where you can do career and vocational education. You can also do music, performing arts type courses, or foreign language. So if you have a jazz band 1, jazz band 2, or say you have a welding 1, welding 2, that's a sequenced course. So as long as you have 4 extra stuff, you're good to go. But that's kind of the big thing to make sure of is that you have the curriculum requirement, the ACT score, and the GPA.
Thank you.
I know what's nice about with our district to where we gear our classes towards just getting the Hathaway, the highest level. So that's what it's made it a lot nicer for the kids to be able to, just take the regular classes that they normally take and then be able to qualify for the Hathaway. So my question was, and I don't remember this for UW, does UW have a kind of like a scholarship award for students who achieve high scores on the ACT? I know a lot of the junior colleges do. If you reach a 25, then they might pay all your tuition.
That's a good question. A lot of schools will have both in-state, out-of-state. I know the community colleges certainly do. A lot of schools will have some different scholarships based on ACT. The university, our Cowboy Commitment, is our main scholarship now. That is the big offering for Wyoming students. So there's not, with what makes UW's a little bit different is, as we've talked about all these different scholarships that you can apply for, the nice thing about the university is it's just one. You apply to this one big deal, and then wherever you qualify on that grid, it's a whole grid system. It's from $500 a year on up to $6,500 a year, depending on where you land. I think with a 3.5 GPA and a 25 ACT, I want to say it's roughly, or I want to say that lands you in the $1,500 per year amount. So it's dependent on ACT and GPA. There's also some different scholarships out there, like talent-based scholarships. So if you're, say you're a music student or something like that, and you're looking to be a part of the orchestra or something like that, it depends on and that might be a bad example, but it depends on the entity. There's also talent-based scholarships like track scholarships. And I know a lot of the community colleges, you can get scholarships for things like rodeo and basketball and volleyball and different things like that too.
And Travis, just to note on that too, the only scholarship, that I would say is for more high achieving would be the trustees scholarship. And that's through the university, through the alumni association, I think too, potentially. I could be wrong on that.
It sounds right.
Yeah.
I remember something. We had a student in our district that received that, the alumni scholarship or whatever they call it. So yeah, I'd have to look into that a little bit more.
That Trustees Scholars Award is a very high, very competitive, high achieving student award, and that one is also based on ACT and GPA, and just because that's kind of the great equalizer as far as how do you evaluate students on merit and whatnot. But that one, oftentimes, if you have students that are up there, you're 28, 29, 30 ACT, your 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 GPA, that kind of stuff, those high achieving students can definitely shoot for that. And the big thing with that to remember, at least for UW anyway, is just to have your application in to the University of Wyoming, your transcripts and your ACT scores by December 1st. I know the Board of Trustees is talking about that as well this year, but in years past, that's what it currently is as of today. As long as you have all your materials to us by December 1, you are being considered for the Trustee Scholars Award, and then we will reach out to let you know if that's been awarded or if you're being asked to step to the next part in the process.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian. Are there any other questions that we can help answer?
So as far as like the October 1st or the December 1st deadline, that's this year while they're still in high school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll have one more question once we get off. It'll just be mainly for Christina. So
Okay.
I'm done with my questions. So
okay, I just have one quick thing to add for a lot of students that I think can be helpful. And Tara, you brought up a great question. A lot of times students want to know, well, I have all these processes and all this stuff to do. When do I do it? When do I apply to colleges? When do I apply for financial aid? And there are several timelines out there one of the most general timelines I can give you is usually I recommend students apply to colleges between August 1st and the end of November. So August 1st and Thanksgiving or something of your senior year. And so that's usually about a year before you're planning on attending in that next fall or whatever. So usually I recommend applying between August 1st and the end of November. That gets you in through a lot of those kind of things. And then you've obviously got October 1, you're working on FAFSA and those kind of things. For us, December 1 is when we need to have everything in for trustees' consideration. And then January and February roll around. It's a good time to kind of keep working on scholarships and those kind of things. Then March comes along, and that's usually when you saw that financial aid package, that example of a financial aid package from Christina. Usually March is when we try to, and I believe a lot of schools try to get their financial aid packages done up and sent to students during March. That way you have the month of April to do some cost comparison. If cost is a factor in the university or the school that you're planning to attend, you can say, well, is this feasible? Do I have enough? What do we have for scholarships? What do we have for financial aid? You know, is there anything still coming in? Is there anything we can kind of figure out? You can kind of make a decision there in April. And then May 1st is our confirmation deadline. So students have to confirm their enrollment and pay their enrollment deposit by May 1st. That's also the date that we have to see your ACT and all of that kind of stuff. That's when we make that final decision on scholarships. Again, disclaimer, this is as of this year, as of today. But it kind of gives you, that way you have that May 1st deadline and then graduation, and you send all of your final transcripts and all that kind of stuff in. And if you want more info on that too, or if you want that in writing or anything, obviously that's all subject to change, but that gives you a good idea at least of sort of a base level timeline to use going through the admissions process. You're always welcome to give me an email or something like that, and I can write that out for you too.
And how many colleges do you recommend kids signing up for?
It's a good question. Depends on the student. I definitely would not put all of your eggs in one basket. My joke is always, especially with a lot of out-of-state students, don't put all your eggs in one basket unless it's ours. But I would definitely recommend applying to more than one school. Even if it's 2, that's great. You know, even if it's at least 2 schools, that's awesome. 3 is even better. That way you kind of have, even if you're like, there's no way that I would go to school there, you know, I think all of you should, you know, and this is coming from someone who works at the University of Wyoming. I mean, I was a transfer student before I attended UW. I think as a Wyoming student, you should absolutely at least apply to one of the Wyoming community colleges, as well as the university, if you're thinking that's what you're going to do, you know. So that would be my advice to students. Apply to at least 2, so you've always got a backup school, and 3 is even better.
Okay.
Awesome. Any other questions before we take this off recording and end for the evening? All right, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.